In today's episode, I'll show you how to level up the spookiness of your Halloween display with a Gothic arched window facade. When I started building my yard haunt a few years ago, it was really important to me that I achieved like a authentic haunted manor sort of aesthetic. Don't get me wrong, I love pretty much every Halloween haunt display that there is, from the animatronic Andes to the Gory Garys to the Hubie Dubois Yards of the World. I wish more people did like spectacular Halloween displays. Wouldn't that just make the world a more magical place? So my vision for Phantom Manor is this spooky, realistic looking cemetery with a huge Gothic brick manor behind it. Only I don't have a Gothic manor. I have a brick craftsman, which isn't very Gothic, and it has off-white craftsman trim and other craftsman details. And 9 months out of the year, my craftsman manor is totally acceptable. But come about mid-August, it just becomes so off-putting to me because I am in the mood to turn it into a Gothic manor, and it just does not look like a Gothic manor. One of the best ways to make a really subtle edit to your house so that it matches the vibe you are going for is with facades. So facades can be super elaborate like the ones you see at theme parks, or they can be subtle edits to turn one little element of your building into something more sinister. Like the Gothic arches we are building today to cover up the off-white window trim on the front of my Gothic manor. This is a very clever and inexpensive way to take something that you already have and make it look like something that it isn't. So let's get into how I made these. First things first, you want to study your window and measure it. Now I have double windows, meaning in each window there's actually 2 windows. So I knew that I was going to need to make a double arch. And then when I went out and measured it, each window was 73 inches tall by 73 inches wide. So next I drew a pattern on the sheet that fit the dimensions of my window, ensuring that the arches completely covered the white window trim. And I cannot stress this part enough. Always, always, always. Dry fit your props up against your house before you start cutting so that you can make changes before it is too late. It is always easy to take foam off. It is a little bit harder to put it back on. I actually had to redo this design 3 times because when I took it out to dry fit it, I just did not like the way that the original couple of versions of the design looked. Now, if you are not a good artist or very good at drawing, you can use a cheap projector to project a image that you find on Google of like an arched window pattern onto the foam and just trace it. I have done that on a number of other props. It works really, really well. And it's a really good way to get cool details. Again, if you're not a very good artist. I'm not a good artist, so I use this trick a lot. I just didn't do it in this case. I sort of freehanded it and it worked out fine. Remember, with facades, you can either make it really precise and perfect and lifelike as if it was actually a piece of the architecture, or you can make it a little more cartoon-like, which is how a lot of haunted houses are anyway, and that's okay. Once you have a design you like, it's time to cut it out. For larger cuts, like these window cuts, I like to use a jigsaw. It's the most efficient tool. It'll get the cut done the quickest, and it's a very clean cut. However, if you do not have access to a jigsaw, you can get a hot knife very inexpensively at a local hardware store or online, and that does the job really well too. Now let's talk texture. I wanted these to blend very seamlessly with my house so that they look like they're actually part of the architecture. I don't want your eyes to visually pick up on a big distinction between the facade and the house. Look at the finish of your house and try to come up with a facade texture and paint color scheme that is going to fit well with what you've got going on. It'll make it look the most natural. So my house is brick and stone, so I decided to engrave a faux stacked stone texture into the foam. I highly recommend, if you're going to be engraving foam, that you invest in a soldering pen like this one. These are only $3.99. I got this one at Harbor Freight. They heat up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit and they slice through foam like butter, and this pointy little end is the absolute perfect size for small or big engraving details. The engraving part seems tedious, but the entire thing took less than 2 hours for both facades, so it's actually not that labor intensive. Now, if you don't like the stacked stone texture that I did on this, I have another video where I made more facades for another window and my front door where I did just like a flat stone slab sort of texture. I'll link it below. Go watch that video for another way to do really cool texturing on a facade like this that doesn't involve like a lot of detailed engraving. Once your texturing is done, it is time to paint. Do not, I repeat, do not use spray paint. There is a chemical in cans of spray paint that disintegrates foam, and if you spray it on your foam props, no matter how careful you try to be, you will mess them up. So just don't do it. Plus, spray paint is insanely expensive. A single can of spray paint, cheap spray paint, is minimum $6. And a prop this big, you will go through a lot of spray paint to cover the whole thing. My preference is to use inexpensive interior house paint. It holds up very well outdoors and it provides really good coverage, far better coverage than our acrylic paint, like our acrylic craft paint. And I oftentimes get very lucky and find the shades that I need in the oops pile. This is a sidebar, but if you want to save money on prop making supplies, become familiar with the oops piles and the scrap piles at your local home improvement store. People mix paint wrong all the time, or they get home and they don't like the color and they go to return the paint, and then the home improvement store will sell it at a discount. So oftentimes I can get a whole gallon for like $5. I can get a quart for like $2, and I can get the little sample sizes for 50 cents. And when I see them, if it's a color I think I could use in a prop, I just buy it and take it home. I have a stockpile of extremely cheap paint that I use for my projects, and it saves me so much in the long run. If you have to mix a color, again, just go find the cheapest gallon or quart that you can find and tell them to mix it. You do not need to get the high-end paint for prop projects. So if I am working with a prop with engraving like this, my first coat is always black. I use a flat matte black. I cover the whole prop. I make sure it gets in all the nooks and crannies and in all the engravings. This is what's gonna give those engravings depth and dimension and make them look realistic. Now the next coat is going to be a thin, almost splotchy layer of a lighter gray or a beige or a grayish if you have access to that. For something like this, I prefer to use a low dap roller and just very lightly roller that grayish color over top of the prop. You do not want it to get in the nooks and crannies. That you want the black to really stand out and pop. It's okay if there's black showing through. It's just gonna add more dimension when you get to the final layer, which is brown. I will very lightly, as my last step, always add a warm brown to all of my props. So in this case, I needed warm brown to make this blend in with my house, which is a warm brown color. I used this like cheap $1 trim tool, very, very lightly dappled it in some brown paint, and then I almost dry brushed it onto the prop using this little trim tool. Once I got it on, I just sort of worked it in and spread it around until it sort of lightly covered all of the grayish and black that I had on the prop, and it just gave it a really cool stone-like finish that blended really nicely into the side of my house. I knew that I wanted to backlight these windows with some sort of a colored LED, and I wanted it to be diffused, and I kind of wanted it to have like a luminescent, shiny appearance at night. So I decided to glue some of this sheer luminescent fabric loosely to the back of the windows. I didn't pull it tight. I didn't want it to mimic glass. I almost wanted it to mimic some sort of a drapery. Now you could do so many things with this to make it fit the aesthetic of your yard. You could do like stained glass film and make it look like it's stained glass. You could use creepy cloth and cut up creepy curtains hanging down. Honestly, there's so many things you could do with this. This is what I chose to do. It had a really cool effect at night. So I hot glued those to the back of the prop before I hung them up. And then I went outside and just mounted them directly to my window frame with command strips. They have been up for 3 months and have not fallen down. The command strips are still holding on surprisingly fine. I honestly thought I would have one fall down by now. All in all, I love how this prop build turned out. This was incredibly affordable as far as materials go, requires minimal tools, it's very easy to install, and when you want to take it down, it doesn't require very much space to store it. And as far as cost versus like wow impact goes, in my opinion, this packs a really huge impact in your yard haunt. I also love that you could keep it up for Christmas and make it part of your Christmas display if you're into that. It gives the house sort of a very like Charles Dickens vibe. I don't know, just some food for thought. I do like the Charles Dickens vibe myself a lot. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you're into building cool holiday props on a budget, please consider subscribing. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, I am Ashley from Memento, Mori, Curiosities, and Props.